Good morning. Good morning and welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna number 116, looking at the Guides, the Scouts, the Boys Brigade and the Girls Brigade. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, and this series of talks is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription to take part in this series of talks, but if you're able to donate towards our work, then we are really very grateful for that. As you will, of course, all be aware, it's been a very strange week in the United Kingdom with the loss of the Queen. And you maybe have noticed that our social media channels have been silent as a mark of respect to that. And so I was unsure whether to do this week's Learn with Lorna or not, but it's an interesting subject to link to the uniformed organisations, and the fact that the Queen was patron of 3 of those 4 organisations. It seemed quite fitting to carry on and do this week's talk, and I'll refer to the Queen through the course of it as well. So I'm going to break this week's talk into the Boys Brigade, the Boy Scouts, the Girls Brigade and the Girl Guides, and talk about what we have in our collections about each of those organisations, and as I mentioned, talk about the Queen and the royal family's engagement with those organisations. So I'm going to start with the Boys Brigade. Now, the Boys Brigade can lay claim to being the first voluntary uniformed youth movement in the world. And the current Boys Brigade note in their literature that many of the world's current youth organisations can trace their roots back to the Boys Brigade. The Boys Brigade was founded in October 1883 by Sir William Alexander Smith, and the first company was set up at a Free Church mission hall in Glasgow, so Scotland can claim the Boys Brigade. But more than that, its founder, Sir William Alexander Smith, who lived in Glasgow from the age of 13, was in fact born in Thurso in Caithness, and so the Highlands and Caithness specifically can also claim a part in the story of the uniformed organisations, the Boys Brigade, and then subsequently all that came after it. The Boys Brigade was a semi-military organisation for boys, designed to foster, and I'll read you the quote of what the aim of the Boys Brigade is and was, designed to foster the advancement of Christ's kingdom among boys and the promotion of habits of obedience, reverence, discipline, self-respect, and all that tends towards a true Christian manliness. It has, of course, retained a close connection to the Church and to Christianity ever since. After the founding of that first company, interest blossomed and hundreds of new companies sprang up across the country and across the Highlands, and we hold the records of some of those in the Highland Archive Service. The largest collection that we hold about the Boys Brigade is, appropriately given its founder, held at Nucleus as part of the Caithness archives. It's been gathered by past and current members, officers, secretaries, and a range of other people. And so I'd like to give my thanks to my colleague Anne at Nucleus, who's pulled together some notes on that collection for me. It's a substantial collection that Anne has just finished cataloguing, and it tells the story of the organisation as a whole, and also its role in Caithness's story. And it tells it through photographs, activity information, reviews, letters, programmes, reports, and a real range of material. And so I'll use that and various items in the Highland Archive Centre collection in Inverness to tell the Boys Brigade story. I mentioned that collection contains, amongst other things, photographs, minute books, correspondence, circulars, and it talks a lot about the Boys Brigade and the way that the Boys Brigade revolutionised the treatment of young people and the perception of young people as well. We can see the vast number of boys who joined of all ages, and we can see the impact that being part of an organisation has. And we've seen a lot. We see in moments like we're going through at the moment in the UK that often things can bring people together. And with the Boys Brigade, one of the things that had that effect was having a uniform. And the boys were given a uniform as part of the Boys Brigade, and that immediately gave them a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, self-respect, and being part of something bigger. The uniform was key to, as we see in schools as well, key to breaking down social barriers. So the boys all were given the same clothing. They were clearly all part of the same thing, and there was nothing that would visually separate the classes. That military feel of having a smart uniform was also echoed in the drills that the boys undertook. And again, this will be a key part, or was a key part, of changing the way that children were viewed by adults, because they were seen to be capable of things like military drill. Companies sprang up all over the Highlands after that first company was founded in Glasgow. The 42nd Company on the Boys Brigade National Roll was formed in the Free High Church Sabbath School in Inverness in 1886 under Captain John Fraser. It lasted about 5 years and had 52 boys and a flute band. There was also another Inverness company formed in Merkinch in 1898, commanded by Major James Guild. And a Jubilee booklet that was produced in 1960 records that that company also only lasted a few years with 70 boys, and it also had a flute band. And so those two first companies that were founded in Inverness faded. But back in Caithness, the first Wick company of the Boys Brigade started in the Old Temperance Hall in Louisborough Street in 1887. By around 1896, that company was associated with the United Presbyterian Church in Francis Street, and it used their hall for Bible class, as well as using the Rifle Hall in Dempster Street for their drills. I'm talking specifically about Inverness and Wick here, as those are where our collections sit, but there were of course companies spread across the Highlands and Islands. Now, I mentioned there that those early Inverness companies were quite short-lived, and they sort of came and went over a couple of years. But something changed in the first decade of the 1900s, and there was a real flourishing of companies of Boys Brigade. And by 1910, there were 6 companies in Inverness. The first was the St Columba High Church, the second Ness Bank Church, the third at Crown Church, the fourth at the Old High, the fifth at East Church, and the sixth at St Mark's Church. Now, there would go on to be another 6 companies in the following years, so you can really see that flourishing growth of the Boys Brigade. Now, interestingly, the oldest of those is not, as you might expect, the first company, but the second company. And that Jubilee booklet that I mentioned explains why the second company is the oldest. In spite of its number, the second company lays claim to being the oldest in Inverness. It came about in this way. In 1907, the Juvenile Rechabites, which was a friendly society and a temperance organisation, in 1907, the Juvenile Rechabites used to meet weekly in the reigning school. The leaders decided to start Boys Brigade work and obtained uniforms from BB headquarters Glasgow. Sometime later, they were most surprised when another company was formed and became known as the First Inverness. On making inquiries, the leaders of that original one found that they had omitted to pay the annual subscription of 2 and 6 to headquarters, which in those days was required before a company could be registered and numbered. This omission was soon rectified, and in April 1908, the second company was duly enrolled, one of its founders being Mr. Peter Swaney, who still takes a keen interest in all its affairs. In those days, Bible class was held on Sunday afternoons, and after it was over, it was the practice of the captain, the late Mr. W. Treasurer, firemaster, to take the boys for a walk. It is on record that he once took the boys to the top of Ben Wyvis, but not on a Sunday afternoon. Maze marching was a great favourite activity of the company, and the team was in great demand to give displays at various functions in the town. So you can imagine how frustrated they would have been to be the original organisation and then find that because they hadn't done some of the admin, they became the second. Now, I mentioned that there were those 6 companies in place. And when they were in existence, they were at a point where they were able to apply to form an Inverness battalion, which they did in October 1909, arranging an annual church parade where they moved between those different churches that the different brigades were based in, the different companies were based in. And the creation of the Inverness battalion allowed for bigger events. And have a listen to this description of one of the camps, which made me smile when I came across it. The 1st Battalion camp was held in Rothiemurchus in July 1910 on the site occupied by the Territorials for their summer camp, and a story told by an ex-member may revive memories for those who attended. On the Sunday morning, the battalion was formed up and commenced their march to the parish church, which was some distance away. Led by the late Captain Treasurer, they took a wrong turning, and it was only after the congregation had waited over an hour beyond the normal starting time that a rather footsore group of boys put in an appearance. It is sad to relate that the point of the sermon was lost on many of them, for due to their exertions and the warm weather, they almost all fell asleep. The 2nd camp was held at Tain, again a territorial camping ground, and for this camp the battalion had to wait in the town hall, Tain, until midnight, when they could take possession. In spite of these setbacks, camp was a successful event in battalion affairs. In succeeding years they were held at Kincraig, Muir of Ord, to which the boys marched via the Keswick ferry, Glenurquhart, and eventually in 1929 at Carbridge, where a permanent campsite was established. At Carbridge, companies from Stornoway, Portree, Ullapool, Taradale, Bewley, Dingwall, Alness, Glenurquhart, Fort William, Elgin and Buckie have attended at one time or another, and in keeping with the brigade object, a resident minister has always been appointed. And I think that really gives an idea of the scale of the organisation across the Highlands and Islands. And of course, many of those young boys and young men who attended at that time would go on to give their lives or service on the battlefields of the First World War, where that military training came in very helpful, something that would not have been expected at the time. And also I'm seeing people commenting about their memories of the skills learned in the Boys Brigade. Now, if I make that all sound very hard work with the marching and drill, there were also a lot of fun things that you can read about in the collection. Pipe bands, so as I'm seeing there, your comment about learning to play the drums, or your father learning to play the drums. There are references to boys learning to play the pipes, to play the flute, to play drums, and so on. Swimming, sports, earning badges, supporting galas and volunteering at charity events, and fundraising and doing good deeds. And when Anne up in Nucleus was pulling together the notes about the Nucleus collection, she told me that one of the favourite things that she had come across in that diverse collection was a collection of notes from parents where they've recorded good deeds or acts of kindness that their sons have performed and then given those notes in to the company to make sure that those were acknowledged. What sounds much less fun is the run that Anne found described, a 54-mile run from Wick to Golspie undertaken by members of the Castletown, Wick, Thurso, Golspie, Inverness, Dingwall and Bewley companies, and they ran from midnight on the 16th of April 1935 until 3 p.m. on the 18th of April 1935. And the 30s was a big decade for the Boys Brigade. There were 50th anniversary celebrations taking place across the country, and many of the Highland attendees of the Boys Brigade attended big events in Glasgow. It was also a time for marking the service of key people, something which continued across the decades. And across all these 4 organisations I'm going to talk about today, that is one of the things that comes across in everything I've looked at, is the appreciation that these organisations have and had for the people who have dedicated their time to run them. whether that's volunteers, brigade organisers, company organisers, scout leaders, brown owls, whatever it is, that acknowledgement of service is very strong in the collections, lots of acknowledgement of people's names. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why the Boys Brigade, the Scouts and the Guides so much valued their association with the Queen. And particularly now, you can see that all of them make reference on their website to a life of service, and that's what their aim is for the young people they work with. In the collection in Nucleus, one of those honoured in 1933 in the Jubilee year was John G. Hood, who was the first captain of the first Wick Company. And when he was, this was noted in 1933, he was the officer with the longest service in the world, and he would go on to serve the Boys Brigade for 60 years until he died in 1946. In Nucleus, we hold minute books for the Boys Brigade from the 1940s, and they reveal details about activities undertaken. So, for instance, they helped the Riverside Committee to raise money and purchase a boat for summer boating. They did leather work and woodwork and football matches and gymnastics and signalling practice and parades and fireman's class. And again, it's very clear that cross between the fun and the military. My favourite entry is from the 27th of December 1945. So, of course, just coming at the end of the war. And the entry says, owing to the present shortage of supplies, everybody might take along at least one spoonful of sugar to the drill meeting on Friday the 1st, so that we may have something good to eat. So I suspect what they were doing is saying, if you bring something ahead of time, we can make something. But it conjures up an image of them all going along the street with a spoonful of sugar. It's a fantastic collection, and I've only scratched the surface of it, as I always do in these talks. And I know that I'm going to run over today, but I thought that you wouldn't mind. Now, of course, the Boys Brigade is still going strong, and there are over 1,200 groups in the UK and Ireland, and around a dozen across the Highlands and Islands. And so far, of course, I've been talking specifically about boys and the Boys Brigade. The Girls Brigade had a slightly different route into being, with more merging and reshaping in their story. The Girls Brigade of Ireland was started in 1893 in Dublin, again with an aim of enabling and promoting a God-centred life, and with a focus on both physical and spiritual well-being of girls and young women. And the empowerment of girls to have a voice was and remains key to what the Girls Brigade tries to achieve. A few years later, in 1900, the Girls Guildry was founded in Scotland, followed by the Girls Life Brigade in England and Wales. So by this point, we have an organisation in Wales, one in Scotland, one in Ireland, one in Scotland, one in England and Wales. And all of these organisations were similar in their aim, their desire, their passion, and their practice in many respects, but they were all operating separately over the next few decades. Very similar events, very similar aim to enable girls to take part in things, to promote a life focused on service and focused on Christ, but disparate in the way they were run. In Inverness, there were companies formed of the Girls Guildry, and we hold some records of the second Inverness company of the Girls Guildry, which was formed by Mrs. Henderson, who was the wife of the East Church minister in September 1940. You might remember that the East Church was also home to the 5th Inverness company of the Boys Brigade. And we hold within that collection a history of the company which records this, and I'm just going to read parts of this to you, but it records this part of their history. In 1940, Mrs. Henderson, wife of the minister of East Church of Inverness, wanted to start an organisation for girls which had a strong church connection. The Girls Guildry was a church-centred organisation founded in Scotland in 1900, providing programmes for girls from the age of 5 upwards. Its varied activities were aimed at helping girls to become mature Christian women. The movement was interdenominational, with a strong emphasis on service to others. The motto of the Girls Guildry was "Wise unto that which is good." The aim was to help girls to become followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, to promote girls to discipline, self-respect and reverence. The promise was, I promise to learn more of Jesus who shows me the way. I promise to follow after purity, loyalty and love. The Girls' Guildry was therefore what Mrs. Henderson was looking for, and a company was formed connected to the East Church. Meetings started early in 1940 with the Reverend Peyton Henderson as chaplain and Miss Margaret Grant as guardian. The company was enrolled as part of the national movement on the 12th of September 1940 as the second Inverness Company Girls' Guildry. At the time the company started, the church halls were being used as wartime canteens, and so meetings were held in the Dunbar Centre. Early in the life of the second Inverness Company, camps were to the fore, with the first taking place at Farr School, where Miss Wilreen MacLeod acted as commandant. Remember the camp overalls. Will this fashion ever return? 1946 was to see two changes in the company. Firstly, Miss Wilreen MacLeod took over as guardian from Miss Grant, and for some time was the only officer. Secondly, the Reverend Henderson left his charge of the East Church, handing over duties of chaplain to his successor, the Reverend George Elliot Anderson. An important date in the company's history was the 6th of September 1950, when the company raised a sum of money which merited the privilege of presenting a purse to Her Majesty the Queen, now Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, at the Palace of Holyrood House, Edinburgh. Along with the first Islay and first Kinlochleven companies, the second Inverness Company were the representatives of the Highlands and Islands at this event. And so you can see there how the Girls' Guildry was founded and came together in Inverness, and also those important milestones for the company. I mentioned that there were all these disparate organisations happening at the same time, and 1965 is the key date in the story of the girls' movement, and the history records it like this. Mrs. Doyle and the Reverend Macfarlane were to see the company through the change from Girls' Guildry to Girls' Brigade in 1965. So in fact, our 50th anniversary celebrates 25 years of Girls' Guildry and 25 years of Girls' Brigade. The Girls' Brigade was formed on the 10th of June 1965 by the coming together of the Girls' Brigade of Ireland, formed in Dublin in 1893, the Girls' Guildry of Scotland, formed in Glasgow in 1900, and the Girls' Life Brigade of England and Wales, formed in London in 1902. This organisation has now spread around the world with companies in 51 countries across the globe. The aim of the Girls' Brigade is to help girls to become followers of Lord Jesus Christ and through self-control, reverence and a sense of responsibility to find true enrichment of life. The badge of the Girls' Brigade illustrates the union of these three organisations and is symbolic of the foundation of Brigade faith in Lord Jesus Christ. In the centre is a cross, the symbol of Christ and his church. Below it is a lamp that our light may shine out across the world. Above it, a crown that we may own Christ as our King. Behind all, a torch, the flame of Christ's living spirit and our devotion to him. The motto of the Girls' Brigade is seek, serve and follow Christ. The Girls' Brigade promise is I promise to try, to seek, serve and follow Christ. So we see within this girls' organisation, as you would probably expect, far less emphasis on the military, but a huge focus on the fact that this is a Christian organisation. And again, it's very, very clear in the history, unsurprisingly, how much the service of past leaders is valued. And again, there's a lot of names referenced, a lot of references to the service given to the brigade by individuals. And there's also records of event participation. So for instance, we can see the girls taking part in events at Eden Court Theatre, they're fundraising, they're taking part in explorer competitions, Commonwealth Games relay, national dance competitions, attaining badges, taking part in sports and so on. And again, like the Boys' Brigade, the Girls' Brigade is still very much going strong with the same core aim that it started with. There are still hundreds of companies across Scotland and 6 in the Highlands and Islands, and I should know because my lovely colleague Anne Fraser, who many of you will know, our family historian, is the current president of Girls' Brigade, Highland and Islands. So much for the brigades. What about the Scouts and the Guides? Where do they fit into this story? Well, we hold a certain amount of scouting material, but not nearly as much as we do for the Boys Brigade or the Girl Guides. But I can point you in the direction of Robert Preece's book, Scouting in Inverness, if you're interested in learning more. The Scouts famously were the creation of Robert Baden-Powell, who had served in the Second Boer War. And if you may remember, I did a talk, I learned with Lorna a wee while ago, on the Lovat Scouts. And Baden-Powell had served in the Boer War and had seen the Lovat Scouts in action. And he published a book about scouting tactics, which caught the imagination of young people, which I think was very unexpected at the time he released it. This was a book written for adults. But all young people, and particularly young boys, were interested and fascinated by the scouting techniques that were recorded, and they played at copying these skills. And he started to wonder if there was scope for him to write a youth version of this scouting book that he had written. This also tied in with an aim that we can see right across this period where all these organisations are setting up, that, going back to your point, Jen, that of trying to give young people an aim and a purpose and to contribute something to society and to be useful citizens with a kind of sense of civic responsibility. And so he wondered if there was a scope to rewrite his adult book about scouting tactics for young people. And one of those who was keen to encourage him to do so was one Sir William Alexander Smith, the founder of the Boys Brigade, who was one of his friends. And they set up a trial weekend with boys, including many from the Boys Brigade, and they tried out different activities and sessions on them. So they did a kind of taster weekend of what the Scouts might look like to see how it worked. And as a result of this, he adapted his book, and it was published in 1908. And then as a result of the success of that book, Baden-Powell founded the Boy Scouts. Now, like the Boys Brigade, it grew very rapidly, and according to the Scouts website, there were over 100,000 across the UK within a very short time. And there were also Girl Scouts right from the beginning too, encouraged a sort of changeable history with Baden-Powell and the organisation with girls. But this is a great quote from Baden-Powell in 1908. "I think girls can get just as much healthy fun and as much value out of scouting as boys can. Some who have taken it up have proved themselves good souls in a very short time. As to pluck, women and girls can be just as brave as men, and have over and over again proved it in times of danger. But for some reason it is not expected of them, and consequently it seldom is made part of their education, although it ought to be. For courage is not always born in people, but it can generally be made by instruction." I mentioned that we don't hold many scouting collections, but we do hold some in the Nucleus collection. Now, the first Wick troop of the Boy Scouts was founded in 1909 by the minister of Bridge Street Church, the Reverend Alfred Coutts. In 1912, this troop, along with numerous others, attended the first ever Caithness Scout Rally in Policy Park in Thurso East, and Baden-Powell was there. He attended that Caithness rally. The troop met in various sites, including Barragill Hall, but they needed a scout hall specifically for them. And so they held exhibitions, they did fundraisers, they hosted concerts, magic lantern shows, and all of this enabled the troop to buy the Marvis Fish Factory in June 1930 for £300. And these challenges of finding suitable buildings, getting volunteers and staff, and resourcing the activities would continue in that and in all similar organisations. And I'm sure any of you who are involved in leading an organisation like that will know that those issues are constant. The Nucleus collection includes information about what the Scouts were expected to achieve. Have a listen to this. The feats that each boy had to be proficient at to progress through the ranks and badges were quite something. For example, Scouts Venturer Badge, over 15. To pass, the boy must be proficient in 2 of the following: boxing, fencing, wrestling, rowing, riding, skating, swimming, diving, gymnastics, tumbling, marksmanship, rock climbing, rope spinning. They must also perform 4 of the following: climb a tree to a height of 30 feet off the ground, vault a fence 2/3 of his own height, throw a 60-foot line to fall in between 2 pegs 4 foot apart at a distance of 50 feet twice out of every 3 times, swim 20 yards wearing clothes, pole jump over a rope or bar placed at his own height on the ground, climb a rope to a height of 15 feet off the ground, complete an adventure journey as a member of a patrol in which he shall play a leading part. The journey must include at least 5 incidents, such as rescue from fire, height, compass work, night work, and decoding. Quite something, a thing for a child to have to achieve. Now, I mentioned that there were Girl Scouts right from the earliest days of the Boy Scouts, and that's come and gone over the years. So there were girls in the Boy Scouts straight away at the beginning, and then for many years there weren't, and that has come full circle now. But the Girl Guides organisation would be founded hard on the heels of the Scouts in 1909, when Baden-Powell's sister, Agnes Baden-Powell, became president of the Girl Guides. And we hold an extensive collection about HARC, at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness, about the Inverness-shire Girl Guides from 1917 through to the 2000s. It includes minutes and reports and bulletins and financial records and all of those things that you would expect to see in the running of an organisation from troops across Inverness-shire. And in addition, there are a large number of photographs and a huge number of guiding manuals and books. And you'll know if you've listened to me a lot, we don't often take published material, but within this collection there are a range of books relating to girl guiding. So if any of you were in the Guides or the Brownies, or you'll find something there that reminds you of your time when you got given your manual and your book. And I wanted to share with you something of the story that this collection contains. So, guiding spread quickly in Britain, and it was not long before word reached the north of Scotland of how girls of varying religions and home lives were banding together to become guides. In Inverness-shire, one of the pioneers of guiding was Mrs. Gooch, who was mother and grandmother of 2 outstanding guide personalities, Mrs. Grant and her daughter Mary. The latter became the County Commissioner of Inverness-shire. Mrs. Gooch started the first Inverness-shire company at Kilmally, registered on the 5th of August 1914. And the Inverness and Central Division was registered on the 9th of October 1915 with the captains Miss McLean, who became a Fraser Titler, as you'll be unsurprised to hear, and various other leaders. The Guides, as well as the Boys Brigade, the Girls Brigade, the Scouts, and so on, all provided huge support to the war effort, whether that was the First or the Second World War. They collected moss, they collected waste paper, they gave and oversaw blood transfusions, and of course many of the ex-guides would go on to serve in the ATS, the Wrens, the WAFs, and so on. By the 1920s, there were companies across in Inverness-shire, Lochaber, Aird, Badenoch, Abernethy, Duthel, numerous others, taking part in camps, competitions, sports, crafts, and so on. There's a fantastic description of a 1925 camp. It records the fact that they all woke up early and bright and early and cheerful to receive their quinine injections. Carrying the gramophone to the campsite, so it describes them all sort of traipsing through the heather, carrying their gramophone, and needing to dry out their straw mattresses that had become soaked in the rain. My favourite part of this report of this particular camp describes them practicing signalling. It says that they were practicing different signals in case of emergency, and it was seen. This was over sort of on the Black Isle, and it was seen by the people at Fort George, who sent a motorboat in record speed, in record time, to rescue them, assuming that their signals showed them to be in dire distress. And it says that the military from Fort George were utterly unimpressed to find them effectively just playing. This is an extract from 1925. a tremendously exciting occasion took place on October the 3rd, 1925, when a Northern Girl Guide rally attracted 500 Girl Guides from the north to give a truly Highland welcome to Lady Baden-Powell at Inverness. Mrs. Mackintosh of Mackintosh was in the chair at the gathering in the town hall. Lady Baden-Powell delivered her address on the progress and success of the girl guiding movement. She was struck by the pride the Highland Girl Guides took in their country and in their flag. Mrs. Macpherson of Glentruim spoke, and Mrs. Greenlees, a division commissioner for Glasgow, delivered an address on guiding in the city. And this collection is full of the Inverness Girl Guides is full of stories of camps, of days out, of them going monster hunting in Loch Ness, of rallies, of the buildings that they fundraised for, of badges, and also referencing sometimes trips further afield. And in our Lochaber Archive Centre collections, we hold some documents relating to girl guiding trips to Switzerland, because Christian Cameron Head, and we hold the Cameron Head collection in Lochaber, was heavily involved in the girl guiding movement. And we hold there some references to that, including a group passport that lists all of those who took the journey to Switzerland as part of an overseas camp. Again, as I've mentioned, this collection too is full of the details of those who served and volunteered and enabled the companies to exist and thrive. And the guides, along with all the other organisations I have mentioned so far, have been part of numerous events and parades, linked to both their own anniversaries and also to wider events. So, for instance, they would mark things like the birthdays of Robert Baden-Powell, but they would also mark things like national events, so taking part in Commonwealth Games relays or royal events like Jubilees. And I was particularly struck by this memory. And if any of you are either in the UK or have been watching any of the coverage of the last few days, you'll see why I was struck by it. Inverness Borough and Aird Division's guides were privileged to share the... I'll start that again. Inverness Borough and Aird Division guides were privileged to share with other youth organisations in lining the royal route on the day that Their Majesties visited Inverness. The former, along with the Sea Rangers, stood along the riverbank and had an excellent view of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. The Aird Division guides, by kind permission of Lord Lovat, were joined by guides from Rothshire and lined the drive to Beaufort Castle. Their Majesties most graciously left their car and walked down the lines to speak to several guiders and to many of the guides. And I'm sure, and I'm seeing Jessica, that you're there as a guide leader. It was very touching, of course, to watch as the Queen's hearse left Balmoral and travelled to Edinburgh, and to see that route lined. And some of those that I saw lining the route were scout companies and girl guide companies lined up along the side of the road. So when I came across that, I just thought, what a reflection of the things that the organisations have held dear. These 4 organisations have a long and interesting history, and of course, all 4 of them are still very much going strong in the Highlands and Islands and beyond. A lot of Girl Guides companies still operational, a lot of Boy Scouts as well. I mentioned at the very beginning of this broadcast that the Queen was patron of the Scouts, the Guides and the Boys Brigade, and her loss has definitely been felt very keenly in all of those organisations, as well as by the Girls Brigade. And I wanted to finish, given the events of this week, by sharing with you the tribute paid to the Queen by Angela Salt, CEO of Girl Guiding, Catherine Irwin, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees, and Amanda Medler, the Chief Guide. This is a statement that appears on the Girl Guiding website. It is with profound sadness that we at Girl Guiding have learned this evening of the death of our patron, Her Majesty the Queen. Our deepest sympathies are with the royal family at this very sad time. Her Majesty the Queen had a long association with Girl Guiding throughout her life. She first joined the Guides in 1937 at the age of 11, alongside her sister Princess Margaret, who joined the Brownies. As a member of the first Buckingham Palace Guides, she took part in camping trips and earned badges in swimming, first aid, interpreting and horse riding. The Queen's extraordinary devotion to public and voluntary service began long before her reign. In 1946, as a Sea Ranger, she joined the crew on a training ship at Dartmouth and performed duties such as scrubbing down the decks. The same year, she was made Chief Ranger of the British Empire. In 1953, the year after she succeeded to the throne, Her Majesty the Queen became Girl Guiding's patron. Over the years, thousands of girls and young women across the UK and overseas have worked hard to achieve their Queen's Guide Award, the highest award available in guiding. Our programme of badges and activities has changed since 1937 as the world and the lives of our girls have changed. But the fun, friendship and adventure that the Queen enjoyed in guiding is still enjoyed by thousands of girls and young women today. Throughout her life, the Queen embodied the spirit of guiding. Every day she kept her promise to do her best, to live according to her beliefs and to serve people. Her dedication and service as the longest reigning monarch has inspired all girls and young women in guiding to serve their communities across the UK and beyond, a legacy our members will continue to uphold in her honour. We are honoured and hugely grateful for the support and friendship she bestowed on Girl Guiding as our patron, and we join the nation in mourning the loss of a truly inspirational guide, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. And I just thought that was a lovely way to end today's look at the Boys Brigade, the Girls Brigade, the Scouts and the Guides. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you can join me next week where I'll be looking at the history and stories of the Highland Folk Museum. The next 4 will be pre-recorded, one because next week when the talk on the Folk Museum goes out, I will be live at the Folk Museum doing a walk-round tour. And the next 3 after that will be pre-recorded because if there's any justice, I will finally be getting to my sister-in-law's wedding in New Zealand. So thank you for joining me today, and a reminder that the series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful for that. Thank you.